show you a close-up detail. That's what they call it, a detail of a specific section of the photograph and a specific section of the painting that I'm working on. So you should be able to see both. Sophia, can you see my iMovie program up on the screen? Olivia, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to turn off the air conditioner. As usual, it's too loud. For some reason, they're not turning off. All right, so I'm going to blow up my screen. And I realize that it's a little grainy. But the first thing that I want you to notice is the area that I'm working on. So I'm basically working on this area right here. You can see this shape is in this area here. I realize, again, that it's grainy, but really what I'm more concerned about right now is making adjustments to value. So like the first thing that I noticed when I started repainting or painting back into this from last Wednesday is that this shape right here, so this little V shape, I'm sorry, this V shape right here is equivalent or analogous with this V shape. And this V shape right here is analogous or a representation of this shape. So you can see this little guy here and here. One thing that I notice immediately is that the contrast at this edge is not as strong in the painting as it is in the photograph. Can everybody see that? So it's dealing with edge quality. The other thing is I can see like a little rock shape here with a little crack and a little rock shape here on the other side of that crack. I see kind of a crack in there, but I don't really see the holistic rock shape. I don't see any of these striations here that are lighter, but not as light as the lights out here. I feel like in here, it's much darker than up here. And I can see like an arc here of dark. And everything above it up here is lighter because I can see that edge, although there is a dark patch in the middle of it. You see how I'm taking those shapes that are existing in my painting and I'm zooming in a little bit more, so to speak, trying to get that next layer of detail. And that's why it's so important to work from general, primary to moderately specific, secondary to very specific, tertiary details and textures. Because if you don't have the primary shape, how are you going to put the secondary shapes within it? And if you don't have the secondary shapes, how are you going to put the tertiary shapes within the secondary shapes? So that's why the process is the way that it is. So actually, hold on a second. I did something wrong. As usual, we need to speed it up a little bit. Okay. Oh, that's too fast. 4 minutes. Wow, took 40 minutes and compressed it into 4. We don't want it to be that much. Or maybe we do, so we can get to painting. Because I did say that we were going to paint today, right? Why is it not selecting everything? There we go. Let's try 4 times. Okay, that's a little bit better. 10 minutes. All right. Oh, and here's Elizabeth. So she's just in time. Perfect. Now we know why I messed up with the speed. So get over here. All right, so I want you to pay attention to this part right here, which is this part right here, because I'm immediately going to attack it with a really dark color that I've mixed not with ultramarine, but with phthalo. So here's where you start getting the really rich blacks with phthalo. So that's what I'm doing right now, is mixing on my palette over here to the right with phthalo. You can see a little bit of it. And you can see how I'm just making little touches of black in there. Now I'm going across, creating that line that separates this part from this part above. Looking at this dark shape here. So do you guys see what that did to that shape? Like just by introducing that black, all of a sudden what happens to that space? It pushes back, right? Did I paint over the whole thing? No. Because those colors are already kind of in the dark gray range of tone, I can actually just put strokes of black. And actually, if you look up close, you can see like a T shape of black here, a little line of black here, a little line of black there. So you can see those lines that I'm putting in. So I'm painting a whole shape with just one stroke. But it's a shape within the shape. So I'm using a smaller brush. You follow me? And instead of going back and forth, you know, brushing out the paint, I'm just dab, dab, dab. Right? Dabbing, right? You guys at home didn't see me embarrass everybody here with my dad joke, right? Josie's got that look on her face. Now you can also see that I'm creating a browner tone to kind of start to lean the color more towards these brown colors and getting some of these lights in here that I see. So now I'm getting these lights down here. And I want you to notice that I'm just laying them right on top of the existing tones. And that starts to give me these little glints, G-L-I-N-T-S, glints of light that I'm seeing in the stone itself. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, you know, it's that smaller brush and working on the high key end of the spectrum. So whites, light grays, things like that. And I am observing what I'm seeing here. So this shape is this shape. This shape is this shape. These little rocks. And you can see I key it up even more with white, and I get even more of a sense of like a rounded rock. You can see the middle tone here with the light tone on top. Now I'm working in this area to get those little rock shapes that I have, the two rocks that divide. So I put down some kind of middle gray, and then I paint in the crack in between them. Now I'm going to come along the edge of this rock to make that contrast the way that it needs to be at the edge. And while this dark paint is still wet, I'm painting some of that same light, this, into that wet paint. And because that paint is wet, it automatically lowers the value of it, right? Because instead of just being on top of dry paint and being a pure white, it's mixing with the paint below. Again, you can see I'm starting to lean my colors a little bit more into that orangey flesh tone kind of color range that I have. So I'm adjusting my colors at the same time that I'm doing detail. So you can see I'm painting right here. And again, you know, painting wet into wet so that I can see a little bit more to lighten up and get these strokes that are happening here. And notice that these values are not as light as these values. Now I'm painting up. I'm going to stop for a second. And I'm going to pan upwards in that image. And you can see I'm starting to get more red up here. So I've got that kind of rusty, reddy, orange color. But again, I'm just laying those tones on top of what I already have existing there to start to lean them in the direction of the existing color. Now I think what I'll do is go ahead and full screen. Because you guys, I think, are getting the idea of, you know, the kind of philosophy of painting smaller shapes within larger shapes. So I'll go ahead and minimize this reference photo. So you can kind of see from afar what's happening. So I'm painting in this area right here, right now. These lighter tones, the darker tones that are surrounding it. So you can see on my palette, I've got darker tones mixed with the phthalo that I'm putting touches of dark in to create these cracks and these crevices. And I've got lighter tones, which are in this kind of red, orange, khaki range of the spectrum. Does that make sense? But again, I'm using just little touches. So you see there I mixed more of an orangey neutral to put these little touches in there to get that kind of gnarly rock face that's happening up there. I realize I've cut it off in the photograph, but you guys kind of get the idea. So at the same time I'm getting more detail, I'm starting to lean the color just a little bit more towards where I want it to be. And the reason I'm able to do that, number one, find the smaller shapes, is because I have the bigger primary and secondary shapes. And the way that I'm starting to be able to lean the color is I'm able to say, oh, the color that I have is too yellow. I need to make it more orange. Oh, the color that I have is too blue. I need to make it more gray. You follow what I mean? So it's about adjusting. And that's why in the initial stages of the painting, it was so important that value be your primary goal. Yes, you're trying to get the colors to match, but more important than color is value. If you don't have the value and the gradations that are underlying, then it's kind of like you're groping around in the dark when it comes to color, because color is value. It's not just a hue. It's got a hue, meaning it comes from a family of colors from the color wheel. It has a value, a lightness or a darkness, and it has an intensity. It can be saturated or moderate in intensity or very low in intensity. You can hear my chipmunk speaking for some reason. I think that was the end of the recording there. So I haven't really finished this side of the painting, but the values are pretty good. If you look at my iPad over here, it's just a matter of coloration. I'm also kind of intensifying the colors a little bit, but that's just because I have a sensibility that likes more intense variation in color. So I'll take the existing color and knock it up just a little bit more. But you can see that this is kind of yellowish, and that yellowish fades to orange, which fades to kind of a reddish color. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do there, is get a more yellow color to fade into a more orangey color as we move up, orangey red color as we move up. But it is about having all of those colors on your palette, the light tones, the middle tones, and the dark tones. So now you've taken all of those colors that you've found during step 1 and step 2 of the layers, the darks and the middles of the light, and you're putting them all on the canvas simultaneously so that they really start to weave and work together. Sometimes the darks are on top, sometimes the darks are underneath, sometimes the lights are on top, sometimes the lights are underneath. But it's about kind of weaving them all together. Does that make sense, everybody? How about you guys out there? Questions? Olivia?
Yes.
Did you have any questions?
I have a question about my artwork specifically, but
Okay, so Olivia went ahead and sent me her images, and I would encourage those of you who are on teams right now to go ahead and do the same so that we can talk over the course of the class. But Olivia sent me these 2 images, and she said in her very sassiest voice, "Is my color better now?" I know, I'm silly. She didn't really say it that way. I just read into it because I read into everything. I don't know. What do you guys think? You think her color's better now? 1,000 times better than it was yesterday. So you decreased the intensity of the color, i.e. you made the colors more neutral. I mean, if I was to really split nits, I'd say it's a little bit too intense, but I don't think it's enough to like really make that big of a difference, right? Only if you're like a perfectionist would I say that you need to change it, but it's certainly a lot better. I think you have one of the diseases that I have, Olivia, which is you tend to like to make things more intense, and that too. So remember your last painting, you made that background too intense. So it's very hard for you, as it is for me, to let go of color intensity and to really let neutrals work for you. But I think you're practicing and learning through experience how to get those colors to work better. I will say that, you know, down here, you've got a better gradation of tone that was missing the other day. You do have these kind of ghostly shapes that we're seeing in the background now. I think that's good. I still think that, you know, maybe this could have a gradation of tone. It seems lighter here to darker here. I think, you know, like with what we were doing with Rebecca, you've got the lights, but you need to have the darks that are underneath the light. So you're going to be putting little lines of dark underneath each one of those little quote unquote pebbles that you have in that concrete. And, you know, similarly, you're going to be putting dark marks down, but they're not all going to be the same darkness. Some will be black, some will be gray, some will be light gray. So there'll be lots of variations. Obviously, there's some work that needs to be done down here. You know, where's this side plane here? Should be here. But these are all things that you can work on. Let's just do something really quick.
I think the biggest struggle for me is the gray that keep getting bluish, even when I use like the
You're talking about
phthalo blue. Yes.
I think those are gray.
Okay.
I think the main problem is that, number one, you don't have a dark enough tone here, right? And number two, you don't have the lights yet, those little speckles of light. So if we zoom in, you know, there's all these little dark dots and then light dots. So you're going to need to mix up a dark, a middle, and, you know, lighter tones as well. And those darks will be appropriate here. The middles will signify the lights here. except for the occasional light that's the same light as this. Does that make sense, Olivia?
Yes. How would I do that? Would I use like a point, make a bunch of dots, and then kind of like while it's wet, go in with the other color and just kind of mix them together?
Yeah.
Make dots everywhere.
Well, don't think of it as like a mechanical dot, because the more mechanical you make it, the more unnatural it will look. So, look at how, like, there's a little C shape here. Do you see that backward C shape?
Yes.
And then, like, there's a little arrowhead shape here. And then there's a line here and a line there pointing in this direction. And I'm not saying you have to put those in exactly the same spot, but the point I'm trying to make is there's little organic nonsense going on. It's not just a bunch of dots. A bunch of dots would be a repetition. What you're trying to do is make a rhythm. And rhythm, repetition is like this, saying over and over again. Rhythm is like this.
Okay.
You follow me? Like there's syncopation happening. It's always changing, but it's still keeping, a beat, right? So that's what I'm talking about. And it's actually so hard, but so fun. Once you get your mind wrapped around that in order to make something not a pattern, you have to be messy. And that's kind of what Rebecca was discovering when she was painting all of those, smears and scratches that were on that big yellow pipe. And for most of us who, there's two types of artists, in my opinion. There's like the messy artist, and then there's the obsessive compulsive artist. And a lot of us, especially in America, I think, we've been so trained to think in a left brain fashion, quantifying, calculating, perfectionism, that we have a hard time of letting go. And it's kind of like in order to make it look better, you have to paint worse. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the more, you try to stylize things, the less likely you're going to be successful. But like if you look at this, like look at this little ship. It's like a little battleship, right? And there's a gray tone first. And then along the edge of that gray tone, there's a what tone?
Like a brownish tone.
Well, it's a dark tone. See how it's gray with a dark edge at the top, but not at the bottom. And then there's little bits of light within that gray. You follow what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a black smudge. It's like a painting within a painting.
Okay.
Yeah? So you've got the whole painting, and then the painting has shapes, and then the shapes have shapes, and then the shapes have shapes within their shapes. Does that make sense? So it's like, trying to think of a good analogy. If you've seen The Shining, at the end, they're walking, in the middle, they're walking through this maze, and the main character is looking down at this model of the maze, and it's huge, and they start focusing in and focusing in and focusing in and focusing in and focusing in. That's kind of what's going on, is we're moving from this overview to this very microcosmic view. But you have to move in that order in order to arrive at the microcosmic. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thus the name subatomic still life, right? Because we're not only, focusing in on a smaller area of a whole, but we're really looking at the smaller shapes within the shapes. Okay?
So should the texture be raised off the surface?
Well, this is a cut into the surface.
Okay.
This is raised above the surface. But it's still going to be made the same way. You've got your gray, then you're going to put your darks down, and then you're going to put the lights right adjacent to the darks. This is really exactly like what we did in Rebecca's work the other day. She had the middle gray rock, and then we mixed up a yellowish gray and put it at the top of that middle gray rock. And that gave it form. You remember?
Yes.
So right now you've got the middle, which is all of these areas. Just if you squint at it and look at it generally. Now you're going to go in with dark squiggles and squares and circles and dots and check marks and arrows and lines, and then you're going to go on or adjacent to those with a lighter middle light tone. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to get bored with that and you're going to move on to another shape and come back to that later. Because you want to get all of these textures worked up simultaneously. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think what I'll do is we'll go ahead and get started painting. And I'll walk around and look at people, people's work, and look at people. And then I'll mix up a little demo of how I would paint something like this, okay?
Okay.
Would you rather me do this or this?
What did you just point at? Oh, this.
What
Okay.
you see now or what you see down here?
Probably
This?
yes.
Okay. All right.
That one
Well,
looks more complicated.
I'll get one of those worked up fairly quickly.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
So why don't we go ahead and start painting? And as we're painting, I'll come around and harass both the people in the classroom and the people online, okay?
Okay.
Sophia, are you doing okay? Okay, okay. Clarissa, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Okay. Yeah? Oh, wow, look at that. No, it isn't. There's a garter snake. Huh? Copperhead? Okay, so let me. Let's see if this works. Where's Teams? Okay, there's Teams, painting, join. Okay, and now I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you guys, Olivia, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh wow, it looks really good.
So just to kind of show you, because it's kind of the same thing that we're going to do, can you like zoom in on this area, Elizabeth and Josie? So just, you can take, take my phone, okay, and just kind of zoom in on that area. So I'm going to demonstrate real quick. So as you can see, that area of the still life is kind of flat still. And you know, one of the problems is that it's like the same mark over and over again. They're all approximately the same size, right? So it starts to look a little bit robotic. So I'm going to go ahead and shine here. So Rebecca's got her palette worked up. I'm going to go ahead and mix, you know, brown. Oh, where's your phthalo? Josie, can you get this phthalo over here for me, please? Thank you. Now she's cheating. She has some umber over here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and mix some black too. So what she has is mostly, like if you squint, there's some little dark areas and there's some little middle tone areas, but the darks aren't very dark and the middle tones aren't very light or have no light. So I'm mixing like a black color here. I'm going to get some water. And I'm going to come in and I think what you'll kind of notice is that I'm not being very precise, right? I'm just kind of making, they're almost like calligraphic marks, right? So I'm going this way and that way and up and down and pointing and squiggling and doing all that kind of stuff. So I'm putting some darks down. And you should already see that they're kind of a little more dimensional looking now. Now shine on the palette. So now I'm taking that same dark and it's recording here. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jesse, for pointing that out. Yeah, I know. So this is kind of a gray brown. So what I'm doing is mixing up, you know, a brownish color. And now I'm going to look down at my palette. So I kind of wet that shape with my brownish color. And then I take that same color and I add a little bit more light to it. And then I might take that same brush and mix it with this oranger color. A little red, so I'll mix a little bit more yellow in it. Drag it into the black that's there. And I'll add some white to it. Don't always have to have a black underneath it, but it doesn't hurt. Notice how I'm kind of like overlapping some of the forms that are underneath. Then I might come back to the black and got that little pebbly thing going on, so I'm going to like not pick out all of them, but just pick out some of the ones that she's got there. Maybe put some down here as well, just to create a repetition of that. This rock is overlapping that rock, so I'll put a little bit of a highlight there. You guys see what's happening there? Olivia, do you see what's happening there?
Yes.
That's pretty much exactly how you would paint the surface of your cement block, right? But you would be using a more restricted palette. She's got multiple colors.
I think I'm just mainly worried about it like being too intense.
Right. Well, do you feel like Rebecca's is too intense?
No. But I don't want it to be like projecting off the surface. That's what I mean.
You don't want it to be projecting off the surface.
So like, because I already made like my base layer, if I came back in, am I basically covering up the whole top with the colors like what you're doing?
No, see, and that's the thing. The idea in painting is that nothing is wasted. You don't want anything to be wasted, basically. Where's your yellow? Let's see. What could I do really quick? Hold on 1 second, Olivia. Well, what we may do is stop once I demonstrate this one last thing, and then I'll set up a little demo. So I'm thinking about that rock right there. This looks kind of brownish. I'm going to mix kind of a brownish green color, I think. So here we have a rock that we can barely see. So I'm going to bring in a middle tone. And notice how like I do it at the edge, and then I kind of drag my brush down. And that creates a transition from light into shadow. You see that? And then what if I want to put like a little ledge here? So the rock goes in, then down, then zit, then down. You follow me? And then I might take a little bit of the white and add it to that. But instead of just painting over the whole thing, I'm going to go within those shapes. You See how I didn't just paint over the whole shape? I painted like a shape within those shapes. And then, because I think it looks kind of flat, I mean, it's better than it was, obviously, because I painted it, you know. That wasn't sassy at all. I know I'm missing clothes. Now I might mix up a black. And go underneath it, and you can see how that gives it a cast shadow underneath it. Does that make sense? All right. So hopefully that helps everybody in some way, form, or fashion. But I think the main idea is that, you know, you have, generally speaking, kind of a grayishness everywhere. So to put these blacks down, and then on top of the gray, put some lights down, you're kind of bracketing the colors that you have by creating lighter intense and darker darks. Does that make sense? Say hi, everybody. Okay. All right, so continue painting. Marissa, I'll pull yours up in a minute. Josie, do you need something specifically right now, or are you just thinking? Okay. I'll be with you momentarily. All right. Yeah, how did that go? Yay! Okay, so go ahead and look here. And I'm going to go ahead and get some paint and stuff. First thing I think you need, I think you've got some pretty good darks. So I'm going to go ahead and put down some yellow. Okay, I have more for you. Who doesn't make it? Really? Huh, interesting. One of the things that I think you are at a disadvantage with is your smallness of palette here. I think if you had a wider space, you'd be in better shape, but it's okay. It's okay. So right now I'm just mixing, you know, putting down your blue, your yellow, and your red. Where's the red? Here? Is this all the red you have? No, this is enough for now. It's okay. So I put down phthalo, not ultramarine. And now I'm going to come in with a relatively, yeah, go ahead and get some water. So we look at Elizabeth's painting. She's got some space going on, but it could be improved, especially when you consider, the actual image that she's working on. So we want to kind of exaggerate probably some of the darks that we have in here. Hey, Joe. So go ahead and grab that. And Joe, you might want to come over here. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up a dark. So I'm mixing the blue, the violet, and the phthalo is the blue. It's not the ultramarine anymore. I've kind of expunged that from my palette and the yellow. So this is going to give me a much darker tone. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in this area to really push those values darker. But you'll notice that when I do that, what happens to the yellow becomes much brighter. So now I'm going to mix the tone that you already have here, or something similar to it, which is kind of a brownish color. And it looks to me to be a lot lighter than that. So you see there, I tested it. And now I'm going to test it again. Okay, that's too gray, but it's the right value. So we'll intensify it over here. Okay, that's pretty good. So now I'm going to blend into the existing tone of dark. And I'm going to paint right over the edge of that flower. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I actually want this dark tone to go behind the edge of the flower. Okay? So if we break that edge a little bit, it's okay. So now I'm kind of going back and trying to match the color that you have, because I don't want to, cover over everything. I want to take advantage of what you already have. So you can see how even though those colors don't match, they're the right value. So they, in effect, match. All right, so now we've got that. And you can see how that deepens the darkness that you have in the photograph, which they should be able to see both of those, hopefully. Now I clean off my brush, and I take my yellow, and I mix a little bit of white in with it. Because Elizabeth's palette is so small, my yellow is getting dirty really quickly. So I'm going to create a palette just for my yellow alone. That way it won't get dirty. So there you can see I pull that right over the dark, and that helps that dark to go behind the yellow, right? Yes. Now, this to me is kind of interesting. So if I take that yellow and I mix it with the dark, I get kind of a gray-green yellow. Yeah. So if I want to paint like a leaf or a petal behind this petal, I can put that down first. And I'm just kind of making it up, but it still is based on what I'm seeing there. And then, bring off my brush. So that gives me like a shadow. Does that make sense? Now I can come in with my pure yellow. I'm going to hit just a little hint of that color in it, just so that my yellow is a little less intense than the actual yellow that's there in full light. And then if I really want to exaggerate things, I can see how that creates like this feeling that one thing is on top of the other.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? As opposed to here where it all kind of mushes together.
Yeah.
So, and you know, we can always come back. And I'm trying like to make things go in like a couple different ways, you know, instead of all just pointing in the same direction. Have some pointing. In opposite directions. And wipe off your brush. And then again, using just your pure yellow. That makes sense? So you can see how much more dimensional it is. So what's really important is to get those darks, you know, underneath things in order to get the lights to come forward.
All right.
Okay? How'd you portfolio you go? Yeah, but in retrospect, it's not that bad, right? Oh, okay.
Do you want your laptop?
Yeah, hold on. Thank you. What were you saying?
I worked on making these guys fluffier.
Yeah. So now, can you get out your palette?
It's actually upside down.
Okay.
It's not hard to tell. I'll probably have to put down some more paint.
Okay, so now we're looking at Joe's painting. And again, you know, you've got darks, you've got middles, you've got light middles, dark middles, but we want some lighter lights.
Sorry,
It's okay. And I'm going to pull up your reference photo.
Kind of got a mess in my palette right now.
That's okay. Okay. Hey, Olivia or Clarissa. Clarissa,
Yes, sir.
can you see both Joe's reference and his painting on the screen right now?
All I see is his painting.
Okay. Okay, can you hold this up here for me? And just kind of look at that screen. So you put, okay, so now I'm going to get some white and I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. And just a hint, that was probably too much, of yellow. Just so that it's not like pure white straight out of the tube. And you can see how that's white, but it's got just kind of like a hair of yellow in it. So I'm going to go ahead and just get some on my brush, relatively thick. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, like with this cloud, I'm going to start and I'm just going to touch with a little bit of that white and just make like smaller marks within the larger marks. Then I'm going to clean off my brush. And I'm just going to go around the edge of those smaller marks just to soften some of the edge, not all of the edge. So I'm kind of being random in the way that I'm doing it. So as that goes into that gray, I'm going to wipe off my brush and kind of just, really what I'm doing is I'm scumbling it. And you can see how that leaves some of the gray that I have in between, right? This initial gray. So then taking that smaller shape, and I'm not paying a lot of attention to what your cloud actually looks like, but it still has the same kind of effect or quality, so you can kind of experiment with that. Now,
That yellow is what I was missing. For some reason, I didn't even think of that, but that makes it so
warm.
Yeah, that little warm tint that opens it up a lot.
Well, I rarely like to use things just straight out of the tube.
Yeah. Well, I was putting a little bit of blue and a little bit of gray in it, but that kind of gives it the same color on the whole canvas. So that yellow does open it up a lot.
And then I might come in here. And one thing that I like to do is put water in it. So like with these little clouds, just put some down and then use my finger to kind of smudge it so that it's not so stark. And then come back and just get, does your ear ever just like randomly start ringing?
Yeah. They're really bad sometimes too. I think it's from all the shows I've played though.
Oh, you play music?
Yes, sir.
Ah. What do you play?
I play guitar in my band.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like,
Oh, yeah, I forgot to come out masonite.
so you can see how, as compared to down in this area, you really start to get more of a sense and kind of zoom in a little bit more in that area. You can see how you get more of a sense of like the fluffiness of the cloud there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Huh? Mhm. Okay, Clarissa, I'm going to pull up your image now.
Okay.
There it is. All right, so it's much better, don't you think, Clarissa?
Yes, it doesn't look so blue anymore.
Yeah. So now what you have to do is you have to figure out how to make these feel like these, but in shadow. So like if you squint at your image, you'll notice that here you have really intense orange, really intense yellow. But here the yellow is kind of dingy and the orange is kind of dingy. So what you have to do is you have to take this color and introduce some of the darkness into that color to dull it down. So that same green that you used here, you need to introduce into here so that you can barely detect that you've changed this orange into a more neutral version. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Because like right now, this and this are almost identical to one another. And while this does have some really intense color, if you squint, it's not as intense as what you see over on this side. And certainly as you move into these areas, they become much duller. So just like I was doing with, I don't know if you were watching, with Elizabeth's flower, I was mixing that yellow with some of the background color to make it duller so that it would fall back. And that falling back would make the yellow come forward. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
And it makes sense because what you're trying to do is you're trying to pull those into shadow. So to mix those colors of the objects when they're not in shadow with the color of the shadow that you're using, I mean, it makes sense how that would make, that marriage, if you will, of those two colors would make those colors look like they were in shadow. You follow what I mean?
Yes.
So like, again, like you're getting closer with the color here, but if you squint at that edge and you squint at this edge, it's much duller. So you need to introduce a lot more of that greenish tone into this. Again, just enough so that you can still see the yellow, but it becomes dingier, and that will help that fall back. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yes.
The other thing I would do is maybe just ever so slightly lighten the edge of the leaf
Okay.
so that you can see it a little bit better. So
Okay.
you want to kind of heighten things. But again, look at how this tends to come forward when it should be coming back. And that's
Right.
because it's too similar to the tones that you have up here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Hey, Sophia, are you off the phone now?
Yes.
Okay. You want to show me what you got?
I have not gotten very far. But
Okay.
you
So
know.
you're very similar to where you were the other day.
Yeah, I've just had a lot going on. I'll get
Okay.
it done though.
Well, just keep working on it, and maybe towards the end of class we can look at it.
Okay, and if not towards the end of class, do you think I could send it to you over the weekend or something like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. Don't expect an answer on Saturday though, because we're having the funeral on Saturday.
That's fine. Sunday is okay.
Okay. All right. Much better stem color. First thing. So let me see. I had your image pulled up here. There it is. So, like, I feel like you're getting what you need down here.
I'm trying to like find the color that I need, and so that I can spread it to the rest of them without wasting so much paint. And it took me a while to get my chips back here. So
Right.
I'm gonna spread this color to the rest of them.
And in reality, though, this color is what you need for most of these. Does that make sense? So that's kind of like, to me, it's the color that you have.
Let's stay
Okay.
low.
So I'm gonna say like a monster. I'm gonna take just a little bit of this color off to the side. And then your white is here. Kind of that kind of pale color there. And then it's going to move.
The more yellowy green in the front,
Mhm.
and then as we get back, we get bluer green. You know, that's a bigger brush.
No, just kind of. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is keep it green but gray it down a little bit. You know what I mean? Because that's going to help these to come forward and that to come back.
I have the portfolio review in my head, and then
Oh.
it said that it was due Friday.
Yeah. So if you look, by the time you get back here, the darks, they become progressively dark, like compare that dark with that dark with that dark with that dark. You know what I mean? So like what I just painted is like in this range. Down here, you're going to have some of that color in the dark. In here you have some dark, but even they're not as dark as like that one. So really making those subtle adjustments is what's going to help to create the dimensionality. Now I think that what you have here is lovely, so I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah, I like this stem. The leaves are my enemy though. I've learned I hate green.
And
I don't like green and yellow. I love them as colors on their own, but I hate using them.
are you about to run out of yellow?
Yeah.
Joe, how are you doing on your color? You good? Rebecca, how are you doing on your color? Yeah. It's a different yellow. You'll notice that this yellow is a little oranger. That's a lot. It is. But the neat thing is you're just kind of working with what you already have. You know what I mean? So it's just a matter of mixing up the lighter values and the darker values on either side of what you already have. feel like I saw my little track scan I was doing the other day somewhere. Remember when I was mixing colors on that canvas the other day? I feel like I just saw it. Oh, there it is. Somebody left a notebook over here. Hey, Olivia,
Yes.
did you know that you left your notebook here?
I was wondering what happened to that. Is it my sketchbook? Is it my sketchbook?
Is that it?
I can't see anything besides Sophia.
Hold on. Can you see it now?
No,
You can't see me?
no.
Click on my picture.
It won't let me.
Hmm.
There we go. Your picture's up there now.
Can you see the notebook I'm holding?
No.
All right, hold on.
Okay, I see your screen with all your tabs on your computer. Oh, yes, that's definitely mine.
Okay.
I was wondering what happened to it.
Yep, I'm gonna just put it over here. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Left the door. Okay.
Thank you.
Huh?
Thanks.
Okay. I'm gonna mix up some paint and try to do a little demo of what you're working on. So give me a second, okay?
Okay. In order to get gray, what's the primary color? Because I keep getting blue. And sometimes I'll actually get the right color.
You're like, is this a plastic snake? What I think is funny is that, you know, he was like, you know, coiling into striking position when in reality, you know, he's a garter snake. He's not poisonous. Now, that doesn't mean he can't, you know, strike at, say, an insect or something. But, you know, they for a human, he's obviously can't eat a human. So he was into the pose that he was into to scare us, you know, into thinking that he was all scary. Okay, Olivia, are you there?
Yes.
So I mixed up this kind of gray tone here, as you can see, and it's mostly leaning a little violet. So I'm just going to take a touch of yellow to gray it down. And then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to do that little raised part. And then this,
Oh, your screen disappeared.
yeah, I got a phone call.
Okay, it's back.
I'm going to mix up, and I got to clean off my brush to make sure that I'm mixing up like a black. So I have my phthalo blue here, and I'm just going to mix straight up quinacridone and yellow, just like I did to make this gray. The only difference is gray has a little bit of white in it. And there's two reasons why I'm mixing that black. Number one, so that I can do the, you know, outside of the brick, you know, what's underneath the brick, which is that negative dark space. Okay, so now I'm going to mix a lighter gray, and I'm going to do it just by adding white to my existing gray and getting kind of a middle gray. And then so that's the top of the brick going down into that side, right? Where it rounds
Yes.
over. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got that edge, and then we've got the flat of the brick, right?
Yes.
That makes sense? And we've
Mm-hmm.
actually got like a little bit of a kind of a jagged edge there where it's broken. So I'm just going to kind of make that edge uneven. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to just kind of make some random marks. And they're probably a little bit big, but this is kind of akin to what you were doing. So you're not like completely far off. Create a little cast shadow there. And then I'm going to come back at that edge where it's broken and so I'm just getting that same initial gray that I had to make those little pebbles that are down in there and everything. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to continue with my dark. So I'm mixing some more of my dark, same mixture. Sorry, I'm having to lay out some more red. I ran out of red.
It's okay.
Now, one thing I like to do, and I'm going to show you on this napkin right here, actually, I'll just do it up here, is like splay my brush, like so. And you can see how it gives kind of like a speckledy pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm doing is kind of, I'm undertoned. So it's all the shadows in between the little crevices that I'm creating. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's step one. Step two is to come back to that same middle gray tone. So I'm going to mix up some more. Little violet. So now I'm kind of overlapping those original marks. I'm not just going over them all, though. Like I'm kind of spacing where I'm putting it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you see how that kind of reduces the amount of the dark space that's happening? You see what's going on there?
Yes.
Okay. Then I'm going to get a lighter tone. So I'm going to take that same color and I'm going to mix it with white.
So you're not adding any water, right?
Nope.
Okay.
But you see how it's kind of getting a little bit more depth now?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll also notice that I'm using a relatively big brush. I went back to the middle gray to go into that shadow. That way the shadow stays as a shadow.
Mm-hmm.
See what's starting to happen? Now, I'm going to get my thin brush. Because what I've done is I've kind of created a pattern or a texture that's very organic. It has a rocky look. I realize it looks a little purple, but that's because of the camera, not because of the, like if you saw it in person, it looks a lot less purple than it does, okay?
Okay.
But you can see the texture that I'm getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see how it's not like just black marks on top, right? It's kind of
Yes.
like a mixing of black and middle and light. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Now I'm going to come back with my smallest brush. And I'm going to squeeze out some light on my palette in that same area of my lighter tones. So here we are with my white. And I'm going to mix kind of an off-white. So there you can see white, and here you can see kind of an off-white. You see what I'm mixing up?
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm going to take my little brush, and this is where, see if I can show you. Like I'm finding all of these little areas of shape. And am I just painting over them?
No.
What am I doing?
Creating texture, just doing little dots, kind of,
But
inside of the brush.
like here's a shape.
Mhm.
You see this shape right here? So instead of just filling it in,
Going around it.
in it, you know, like I'm taking the shape and I'm putting little light marks on top of it. And
Okay.
like to thin out some of those black marks so that they're not so thick, because they're not really thick in the source image, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I just kind of crowd them out and make them thinner. But the important thing is to not just get rid of everything that you have that's existing. It's more about taking, you know, like, see if I can show you. Like, this is a shape right here. Do you see it?
Mhm.
So instead of just painting over it, I paint inside of it. Do you see how that creates that kind of granular-like texture?
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a lot more clear.
And you know, it seems like you're just, you know, making dots forever, but you're not really, because you're not covering the whole surface. You know what I mean? And if you look at the surface of that brick, you know, there are bigger areas of dots, smaller areas of dots, so forth and so on. Okay?
Mhm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing, Olivia. I don't know if you can, if you're still watching, but like to take your brush and to put down some like opaque areas where the white is very strong. And then as your brush runs out of juice, spread out the run out of juice part, if you understand what I mean,
Mhm.
because that gives you like a grayer white than what you have here. And if you look at the surface of that brick, you know, there are certain little flecks or rocks that stand out a lot more. Like over here in the corner, I can see 1, 2, and then around it, there's a lot more kind of grayish marks. So you can see how as the paint runs out of gas, these tend to come forward, whereas this up in here where the paint has run out of gas, these tend to come forward, whereas up here where the paint has run out of gas, it's not as light. And that's perfect for like painting in these shadow areas, because you can see how it still stays to be a shadow, but it feels like it's got texture just like the surface does. But because this is paint that's run out of gas and against a black tone, you see what I mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you find that the live helps better than me doing demonstrations? Or is it like just more help but different?
Wait, what was the first question?
Well, you know, I record demonstrations, and those are all well and good for giving you an idea of the steps of the project. But do you find that supplementing them with these types of demonstrations helps?
Yes, because your drawing is not the same as my drawing, and so there's different like deal with.
There's different, I mean, it's the same conceptually in how you approach it, but it's different because it's different colors, different texture, different surface, etc.
Yes, so I think they both help.
Yeah.
One way or
Well,
another.
that's why face-to-face is so important in art. Because ordinarily I would be standing next to you and helping you, but I guess this is the next best thing.
I think for the day before it's due, it's actually better to do it like what you're doing today.
Okay. So maybe, you know, the demos are fine for the first couple times, but then as we walk into the wrap-up phase, we do like one-on-one demos. Okay, that makes sense.
I agree with that.
Okay. Is that you, Clarissa?
No, Sophia.
Do what?
Who said I?
Oh no, I didn't say anything.
It was me,
Who's me?
Sophia.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. Oh no. Oh. Oh yay. I found my white. Hey, Danny.
Yes, sir.
How did your portfolio review go?
Very well. I passed.
Yay. Good. How's your painting coming?
Pretty good. Yeah, I made like I'm on the same level as someone else who said like they didn't make too much progress, but like I made some subtle changes. But it definitely will be done by Monday.
Okay.
But it's definitely coming along really well.
Good. I wanted to show you guys one last thing before we wrap it up, because we're running into 2:42, so we've got about 10 minutes left. But I wanted to show you one quick thing. Let me get a nice brush. This is the loosest plug ever. There we go. And, you know, Sophia said, is it okay if I send you an image for you to critique over the weekend? Yes. You guys can always feel free to send me, you know, an image and say, can you make any last minute recommendations or whatever? Let's see. I guess I need to rejoin. Join now. Share screen. Share photo. No. Share screen. Share. Share screen. Start broadcast. All right, come on over here real quick. And somebody could hold the phone for us. I'd really appreciate it. Over to my station real quick. Wow, that's a really weird noise.
I almost had a mute for that.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, it's really resonating. Hold on. There it is. How do I? Well, Why did it just now decide to start echoing? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I sold a painting to why is it doing that? It's freaking me out. Stop. Son of a gun. Okay, so I sold this painting to the Gainesville Housing Authority, Housing and Urban Development. And it's going to go in a children's art center for kids in the projects and stuff to come take free art lessons, and they wanted to have art in the halls and everything like that. So if you could take this. So this painting is like old. And I realize I'm echoing really bad, and I don't understand why. You guys hear me? Olivia.
Somewhat.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, way better.
Whatever. So once a painting is finished and dried, usually that's in acrylic about a month later. In oil, it's like a year later. You do what is called a varnish. This is Soluvar matte varnish, and it's acrylic varnish, artist acrylic, not the varnish that you would use on an oil painting. Oil paintings, you have to wait a year before varnishing. But what varnishing does is it puts a protective layer over the painting, and it enriches the color so that the colors, the darks seem darker and more, I guess, deeper. So the space will increase a little bit. It also gives a protective layer in case dirt gets on it. You're able to clean the surface. And they can actually strip off the varnish layer and reapply the varnish if the varnish gets tarnished over time. So I put just a little bit in here, and it's kind of thick. And you use a brush that's large, and you don't want too much on there. And you also don't want to brush it too much because as it dries, it'll get cloudy because, you know, you're essentially scratching into that surface. And I kind of look at it at a raking angle. but I think you can already see what it's doing to the colors. Yes? So this is called the varnish layer. And it's kind of how you finish a painting. But like I said, you know, within 30 days of the finish of a painting, if it's acrylic, you can go ahead and varnish it. And all you have to do, a little hair, all you have to do to take it off, if you do want to take it off at some point, is use mineral spirits, and that'll take it off without damaging the paint layer. So my friend who bought the painting, or I guess the guy who works for the HUD, who bought the painting, was like, "Are there any paintings of animals? Kids really like animals." So I was like, "Yeah." And I thought this would be a nice one. So that's the varnish layer. And then you would just clean your materials with mineral spirits, and that'll, you know, get it all out of your brush, and the brush won't be ruined. But I think you can kind of see, like, you know, you want to check to make sure that it's even. So what's going to happen is it'll like kind of settle so that it's one uniform field. And you can see that the darks automatically become darker when you put that varnish in. Because acrylic tends to dry a little bit lighter. So, okay, thank you. Could you guys out there in Teams land tell the difference once I put the varnish on?
Yes.
All right, guys, have a good weekend, and email me if you need anything, okay?
Will do.
Okay.